Good evening, everyone, and welcome to the Ann Arbor Area Transportation Authority Board of Directors meeting. It is Thursday, 4/17, and we do have a quorum present. Welcome, everyone. First on our opening items is to approve the agenda. With your indulgence, I have 3 changes, please. The first change is there are no policy monitoring taking place this evening, and so therefore 5.1 policy language discussion is not needed. So we'll remove that. And then I would like to add 2 items under emergent items after the CEO contract update. The first item would be 8.2 meeting length. I had a board member contact me and wanting to add this as an agenda item, and I agreed with them that it was a pertinent discussion to have. So if we could add that as 8.2. And then finally, 8.3, I would like to add Kyra's farewell. And with that, are there any other changes, additions, deletions that we might have? And if not, would someone like to make a motion to accept the agenda with those changes? Rich?
So moved, Rich.
Great, and seconded by Julie. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next is public comment. I don't see anyone. Oh, I do see someone in the gallery. Hi, Rob. We've just started public comment. Would you like to sit down for a moment and I can see if we have anybody online, or would you like to speak now?
I'll take a moment.
Okay, very good. Deb, is there anyone online? Oh, we don't have anyone online.
Well, thank you very much. Shortest wait ever to speak at a, I just walked up the stairs. So do I speak into
Yep, you're right there. You're
all right.
welcome.
Well, thank you very much. Just thought I'd come by to talk about our TheRide and the transportation cards that we use. So my story, about 4 years ago, I lost my license through no fault of my own when I found out that I had a genetic condition, became legally blind, and I was driving back and forth as a nurse. And well, I moved here because we have the great transportation system here. It's amazing being able to use buses. So that's kind of like my license. So, yeah, I should have taken the elevator.
Take your time.
All right. Well, I found out about a week or two ago, a couple weeks ago, when I called for TheRide, that my pass had expired. And someone mentioned, if you looked on the card, you would see that it was expired. But people don't always know that I don't see anyone's faces, things like that. So what I found is that, so that was my fault, my bad. And so the day I came to get the process started, I brought it in and I had to let go of the card. And I think it's shredded, I'm not sure, but it doesn't matter what they do with it though. And they said it's about a 3-week to a month maybe wait. You have to go to your doctor and do that kind of thing. And so I relinquished that. I went to the state of Michigan because, of course, I also didn't know that my state had expired as well. And they replaced that immediately with a piece of paper that said, here's your temporary, we got you, it'll be in the mail soon, carry on, you're fine. And I just thought it's a story worth telling, that we're here in Ann Arbor where we try to be as good. We're not the leaders and as good, but obviously the best. And if we can make a better system, I thought, what an opportunity to come by and talk about that. Like, my thought was that in the last 3 months, if any bus drivers who look at it had said, oh, it's going to expire soon, you might want to get that renewed. I had been to my doctor in the last couple of months. I absolutely would have taken care of it and there would be no lag time at all. Or if I called for TheRide, and if the pop-up, which I understand comes up when it expires, then it comes up. But if it somehow could come up a month or 2 or 3, or even whatever works, that would give passengers a nice little notice for that month time. And so I thought I'd just mention, if that's something that could be looked at, it would be cost free and a helpful way or to put a piece of paper and give, like the state does, something that says, you know, here it is, we got you. We're going to give you a month temporary, because I know if it happened to me, it's probably happened to other people, and I understand it takes a little while. Also wanted to give a lot of credit to Serena, who is processing, you know, I'm sure you know, and she actually called and worked with me, and honestly, got it renewed already. So the issue's already been resolved, but thanks to her being so wonderful in what she did. So, but I almost didn't come out tonight, but then I thought, you know what, there's probably other people that run into, I mean, we all forget about deadlines sometimes. So thought I'd come out and just mention that, if there's anything that could be done to help remind passengers.
Thank you for your feedback.
Yeah, that's all. Thank you, and I still think we have a great bus system and ride system here, and I'm very much grateful for all that you all do. Thank you.
You're welcome. Yes, Deb?
We do have someone online, Lisa Stanislavatis, and you are unmuted.
Can everybody hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So I just wanted to join. My first time ever that I've been on a board meeting. I have a daughter who is a disabled adult. She didn't want to join with me today. I was kind of hoping that she would, but she has used A-Ride services for 6 years now. And it's ironic, you know, the gentleman before me had a lot of positive things to say, and I appreciate that. Um, However, our experience, my daughter's experience, and my husband and I have to help get her to park and ride 3 days a week where she utilizes a ride because she doesn't drive. And we have had not so positive experiences. While, you know, I appreciate everybody's hard work and the drivers are always, you know, very, very nice and very friendly. Um, I have several examples and I won't go through all my examples because there's numerous ones that I've actually taken notes of.
I could
We've tried
interrupt
working.
one moment, Lisa. I want to let you know that there is a 3-minute time limit. You have 2 minutes left.
All right, thank you. Yeah, we've tried working with, you know, my daughter's tried working with the dispatchers. We've made comments to the drivers. I'm just wondering if anybody here can provide me with any feedback as to why the buses are consistently late. Carly's actually had bus drivers that don't show up. She then has to pay for an Uber ride, which, as we all know, is very expensive. Um, Drivers who can't find park and ride. You know, there's numerous examples that I could provide. Again, I obviously don't have too much time here, but I'm wondering if anybody can provide me with any feedback as to, you know, are you short-staffed? Do the dispatchers maybe, you know, overbook? I mean, I don't know. I'm sort of at a loss as to why Carly consistently has problems.
Normally, we don't respond, but Mr. Carpenter has his hand raised, and I'd like to take this opportunity to allow him to speak.
Good evening, Lisa. My name is Matt Carpenter. I'm the Chief Executive Officer here at the agency. My staff and I would love to connect with you maybe tomorrow if you're available and hear these details, and then we can help you work back and figure out what has occurred. Your story is concerning to us and unusual, and so if I gave you my email address, would you be willing to reach out to us and we can put something together?
Sure, that'd be great. I am around tomorrow. I'm working tomorrow all day, so I don't know what your availability might be. But if, you know, maybe we could even schedule something either early in the day or some day next week. It's totally up to you. But yes, I'm totally open to that.
Wonderful, wonderful. So if you have a pen handy, I can give you my email address.
I do.
It's mcarpenter@theride.org. So just MCARPENTER at THERIDE.org.
Okay.
And if you
And
send me
you're
an
the,
email, we'll get something together and booked. I don't know if we can do it tomorrow, but as soon as we can
okay, and you're the CEO.
for
Tell me that
this
again.
organization. Yes.
Oh, okay. All right, thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
And one moment. Deb, is there anyone else online?
We have no one else.
Thank you, everyone. We're going to close our public comment section and we'll move on to general announcements. I have a quick one. I want to say thank you to our governance committee for coming up with a very creative idea. As everyone knows, Jesse needed to step back from his role as chair of the service committee, and we were trying to decide how to fill that position. What we're going to do is on a temporary basis from now until approximately September, we are going to do a co-chair position, and so that will be handled by Rich Chang, who will take care of, he's already sitting on the governance committee meeting, or on the governance committee, so he will be able to handle that end of the business, and then Simi Barr has graciously agreed to chair the meeting. So I want to thank you, gentlemen, for taking care of that, and then we will revisit this in the fall. Are there any other general announcements? Seeing none, we will move on to the consent agenda. Would someone like to make a motion to approve the agenda? Yeah, I'm sorry, did you have something, Jesse?
Oh, no, I was just so moved.
Oh, you're so moving, okay. And seconded by Simi. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that passed unanimously. Thank you, everyone. Next on our agenda is the Ownership Linkage Task Force, and that is Mr. Rich Chang.
Hello, everyone. A little bit of an update today. I don't know if you all saw, but Forrest and team, they released their service standards review process. So there's actually going to be some meetings coming up. They also have an online site, a portal at TheRide-engage.org. Which has a lot of wonderful information, frankly, stuff that I also learned quite a bit from. But one of the parts that I really appreciated was there's an awesome survey that, frankly, I think we're going to get, as a board, a lot of great input, especially values. I think they did a phenomenal job with the questions they asked. There's some rankings. There's actually some trade-offs, which are the ones that I'm really super excited to see the results from, because I think we're going to get a lot of really good inputs. And that actually ties in nicely with a recent meeting that Kathleen, me, Matt, and Jeff attended with Mayor Taylor from Ann Arbor. We met with them on April 7th. And the next step is basically I'm going to be reaching out to a couple city council members that we know are very heavily involved in public transportation initiatives to set up some one-on-one meetings with them, and then we'll expand from there. But basically, the mayor gave us a blessing to just handle this how we view as best. But we actually had some really good discussions with him around routes, vehicle sizes, and even just like bus stops, right? A lot of decision-making that I think it's safe to say that he found very informative and helpful, which will also enable him to be a voice and also a champion for us. Because some of the questions he asked, I know, frankly, I had originally wondered about before I started my whole AAATA journey, and I'm sure other people in the community are wondering that too. But we also did get some really helpful input from the mayor. One, in regards to how we can, or how he recommends that we interact not just with city staff, but also with various commissions. And the biggest one that we got is actually ridership, at least for him, was more important than coverage. So that's just another data point for us to consider from that. But that's all I got.
Any questions for Mr. Chang? Seeing none, thank you so much. We will move on to 6.1, onboard survey results. That's Mr. Ken Anderson and Mr. Hugh Clark. And I believe they're going to be joining us online, so Deb will get that set up momentarily.
Hello, everyone. Can you hear me and see me?
Welcome.
Thank you. So good evening. For those of you that aren't familiar, I'm Ken Anderson. I'm the Senior Transit Planner in the Planning and Innovation Division at TheRide. And since 2009, TheRide has gathered demographic information on its fixed route riders every other year using a written survey on board its buses. The only break in this pattern was during the coronavirus pandemic. These surveys measure trends in the demographics and riding behaviors of our current customers. The patterns are then used to guide the ride staff in optimizing the efficiency of current services, distributing resources equitably, and then planning the design of future services. TheRide employs the CJI research firm to gather its survey information, which includes things like rider population, trip purpose, usage, duration, and customer satisfaction ratings. Dr. Hugh Clark, the owner of CJI Research, is going to present the results from the latest iteration of the onboard survey taken back in 2024. So I will turn it over to Hugh.
Thank you, Ken. Appreciate that. Good to see everybody. I'm going to show a PowerPoint, a very brief PowerPoint. Whoops, I lost the Zoom. Come on. There we go. I'm going to share the screen so that we can show a selected number of slides. It's a very brief presentation of what is actually rather long set of slides, but we're going to summarize it very quickly. I'm going to share this screen. Ken, tell me if that sharing is working.
I can't see anything yet.
You can't see anything yet. Well, that's odd. But we can work that out. Let's try this again.
There we go.
Okay, that should work then. All right, put it onto slideshow mode. We need to do that. There we go. All right. The most recent survey was conducted on the buses in October of last year. As Ken described, we get on the buses and do a random sample of the riders. The survey was conducted in October. A total of 1,707 people were surveyed. The margin of error in a survey of that size is plus or minus 2.4, so it's pretty precise. I'm going to talk about three different aspects of the survey tonight. We'll start with some data on how people use the ride. We'll switch into the topic of how satisfied people are with the service, and we'll end with the demographics. First, let's look at trip purpose. And to nobody's surprise, in a college town, 27% of the riders say their purpose of using the ride when we interviewed them was to get to school or college, or it's mostly college. Another 48% are going to work. Now, there's some overlap there too. Some people that are going to work are also students. We haven't broken those out in this particular chart. But think about this too. Another 13% are shopping. So if you take those three groups together, you have a very substantial economic impact of this system. People are getting to work, about half of the people getting to work. So there's a big labor mobility factor here. Another fourth, or a little more than a fourth of the riders are preparing for careers, and another 13% are going shopping on a short-term kind of economic impact. And the balance have other necessary kinds of activities. But I want to emphasize the economic impact components. How frequently do people use the ride, and how has that changed over time? If you notice the orange bar in the center, that represents the people that say, I use the ride 4 or 5 days a week. And you'll see that's declined from 43% to 31% over time. Clearly, between 2017 and 2022, of course, the bottom fell out of that because of the pandemic. But some of that was regained in 2022, but there was a continued decline. We'll see what happens now that there's a move to get people to go back to the office. One of the characteristics of most transportation systems, and we do these kinds of surveys all over the country, is that there's a great deal of turnover. And if you'll see that red oval down in the lower right, it suggests that about a third in 2022 and 2024, about a third of the riders said they had been using the ride for less than a year. So a great deal of churn. Hard to run a business with that kind of churn, but that is the way most public transportation systems work, because most of the riders tend to be young. And if you look at those that say they've been riding for 2 years or less, that consistently adds up to about 55%, somewhere in the mid 50s. So that's one challenge that the system always has, to keep information flowing to a rapidly changing set of customers. One thing that we're always interested in these onboard surveys is the origins and destinations of trips. In this particular chart, it's the kind of unusual chart. If you were to sum all the percentages shown in this slide, you would see they add to 100%. In other words, this is all the ridership. We break it down from point of origin at the top line, reading from left to right. And we relate that to the same groupings at the left. So Ann Arbor, for example, 57% of trips are originating in Ann Arbor and ending in Ann Arbor. So close to 60% of the trips are within Ann Arbor. If you expand that to nearby destinations, Ypsilanti City, then that increases it to 75%, either within those jurisdictions or between them. And if you expand it out a little farther into Ypsilanti Township, you find that a total of 86% of all the trips are within those three jurisdictions, are within them or among them. So it's a fairly concentrated type of origin destination system. One of the other things we're interested in is perceived duration of certain aspects of the trip. For example, we ask people how long it takes them to get to the bus stop. Now, this is obviously a perception. It's not a measurement, it's a perception. So let me explain this chart a bit. First, the big blue mountain area in here represents the entire ridership. So if you read the blue numbers above that blue mountain, you'll see, for example, that 28% say it takes them from 5 to 6 minutes to get to the stop. And the people to the left take less than that. Another aspect of this chart is these lines. They represent the cumulative percentages of people taking this number of minutes to get to the stop in each of the three surveys, 2017, 22, and 24. What I want you to look at in this case is the consistency. There's not much difference in those three curves. You see that they're very similar across the board. Another aspect of this is that if you if you block this off like this, you'll see that half of your riders, 50%, say it takes them 6 minutes or less to get to the stop. That's really good. And if you expand that out, you'll find that a total of 74% say it takes them 10 minutes or less. My experience in other transit systems is that these are very good numbers in terms of proximity of the stop. They're not too atypical. You're not wonderful in this respect, but you're very, very respectable. People that are out at the right end of this, that say takes them 20 minutes or 21 minutes or more, most of them are park and ride or some other exceptional situation. Another aspect, another way to look at this, whoops, I'm sorry, I missed one thing here. I don't think you can see it in this. We had broken it down into the mean number of minutes it takes in each of the several jurisdictions, Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti City and the township. I can't see it on my screen here, so I can't just read it off to you. But we've got a little bit of that in this screen here. In terms of total duration of the trip, including both time to get to the stop and perceived total time of the trip, we find that for the total system, the mean is 27 minutes. So people are saying, oh, it takes me about 27 minutes to get where I'm going, all told. And that includes some of the extremes over here at the right that say it takes me a long time to get there. And so the mean comes out at 27 and the median at 20. So half say it takes them fewer than 20 minutes and half say it takes them more. Again, the cumulative line shows you the total percent of people that are traveling that many minutes. So total of these add up, the 5% saying 0 to 5, 24%, 6 to 10, and so forth. By the time you get up to 21 to 30, you've accounted for 75% of your ridership says that it takes them 30 minutes or less to get where they're going. If they have to transfer during the trip, the mean jumps to 38 minutes from 27, and the median to 22. Paradoxically, there's a little difference in the median because not everyone answered both aspects of the question, but it's approximately, the median is approximately 20 minutes overall. And again, I'm sorry, I apologize because of the way the Zoom is working. It's hiding the numbers that are in the slide showing the differences among Ann Arbor, Ypsilanti City, and Ypsilanti Township. Turning to customer satisfaction, the first thing I would point out is that the way this slide is organized, the green bar is those people that are quite satisfied with how service is at the moment. The gray portion of the bar is pretty neutral, and the reddish area at the left is rather dissatisfied with the service. So the first thing I would point out in it is that 88% are quite satisfied. You're doing a very good job, basically, is what I would say. And that's one of the higher scores that I've seen in terms of overall satisfaction. Another aspect of this, another way to look at it, is that 71% or more say that they're satisfied with most of these 12 components: safety from accident, distance from the bus stop that they use most often, to duration of the trip, and so forth. 70%, 71% or more are quite satisfied with those things. The most satisfied are most satisfactory aspects are things like safety from accidents, driver courtesy, feeling of personal security while using the ride, which is important given some of the news that we've seen, and we'll deal with that again in a moment. Overall quality of customer information, all of these things are very satisfactory. The tougher ones are such things as the total duration of the trip, enough service where you want to go, dependability of making transfers, and at the bottom two, predictability of bus arrivals, and shelter at the stops people use. Those are not atypical of satisfaction scores we see in other transit systems as well. Those are tough nuts to crack. I mean, it takes some serious capital investment and managerial changes. Turning again to the security question, because it was so much in the news for so long, primarily because of problems in New York, that we did ask about this. Basically, if you look at the left end of this, of each of these bars, the blue bar represents people saying they feel very secure in these locations. The orange, they say they feel secure. And in each case, on the bus, the Blake Transit Center bus stops, and even at Ypsilanti Transit Center, those two are very important. Most people fall in those two categories if you combine them. But the situation does vary, the location varies. On the bus, they feel very secure. 45% saying very secure, 37% say secure. Blake Transit Center, a little less, but still quite secure. Bus stops, a little less, but still very good, more than 70%. Ypsilanti Transit Center, less sense of security, and we asked people why. They gave us some open-ended responses, which we have shared with Ken and his crew. Turning to the demography of your ridership, one of the changes over time since the first survey in 2009 has been the change in this response. We asked whether a vehicle was available to you to make this trip. Another way to say that is, if you wanted to, could you have driven? And that has changed substantially over time. Vehicle availability has declined from 40% on down to 26% in 2022 and a little lower than that in 2024. And no vehicle available has increased commensurately. So a little more transit dependency going on in this market. In terms of employment, that's been quite consistent across the board. We've had around half of the ridership saying they're students. Now, if you recall back, we asked people trip purpose, and 27% said they were going to class and or to library or whatever, but it was a student trip purpose, but 52% are saying they're students, so they use it for other things as well, recreation, getting to work, so forth. So I apologize that the way this is working, I didn't realize that Zoom was going to hide these things for me, but it is. What's hidden for me is the 2024 number. I just can't see it on the screen, but you can see across the board that this is a very consistent ratio between those that are say they're students and those that say they're employed and or in other kinds of capacities. That's been very consistent across the surveys every 2 years. One thing that has been inconsistent, and we don't really have a good explanation for this, is whether people work in off-peak periods. We asked them, does your job typically require you to work weekends? And of course, this is asked only of those people who say they're employed outside the home. And that has changed. And it was relatively high in the early period, 2011. It rose to 57%, stayed there, but then it declined 2017 and 2022. Exactly why? Don't know. Because we can't say it was because of COVID, because 17 preceded COVID. But then it bounced back to the mid 50s in 2024. Exactly why it is, we don't know. It probably has more to do with the nature of part-time employment and so forth than with any characteristic of the ridership. Do people typically have to work after 9 p.m.? Again, that has varied substantially, declining again in 2017 and 22, and again back up to its starting point of 43% last year. A similar kind of fluctuation has occurred in having to go to work before 7 a.m. And that has not varied as much, but it's varied substantially as well. I pointed out earlier that most riders, a large portion of the riders are very young. What happens is that people get started in their careers, they go to school, they get trained, then they, at around age 27, there's a big drop off, and people earn enough money to buy a car, they may move to the suburbs, and there's a long period in which the percentage of riders in each age group diminishes consistently. But the big block is riders that are 27 or younger. That's 50% of the ride's riders. Finally, to end, we look at race and ethnicity. We pointed out that the nature of the ridership has changed in terms of transit dependency, in terms of the hours worked, and a number of other characteristics. One of the things that's changed is the representation in the ridership of minority groups, as the people that self-identify as white or Caucasian, that has declined over time from 47% to 38%. At the same time, those that identify with one of several minority groups has increased substantially over time. So the picture of the ridership has become more diverse and 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 more interesting in some ways over time. A challenge, again, to keep ahead in terms of the flow of information to people and dealing with different cultures and different languages. So it's an informational challenge for the ride as well as a service challenge. And that ends the summary right there. And happy to take questions.
Thank you, Hugh. We've opened it up to the board. Would anyone like to start? Rich?
All right, I'll go first. Thanks, Hugh. This is really helpful. The questions I have actually might be answered in the more comprehensive report, which I assume will get shared with the board. Because if it is, feel free to just say like that's in the comprehensive report and I can look at it there. Because the two questions I had was for the trip purpose slide, for the go shopping, I didn't know if that is just like pure retail or if that included a breakdown of say like restaurants versus retail. And then the second question I had was just for the demographics, if for the employment piece, if we actually have a breakdown of role, right? Is it folks that are, for instance, like the ones that are after 9, is it because they're primarily going to the hospital to work there or else?
Those are really good questions. And unfortunately, in a survey of this nature, we can't break it down that way. So as to trip purpose, people that say they're going shopping, they probably are really shopping Because if they were going to restaurants or whatnot, they were coded as recreation. But we cannot break it out farther, unfortunately, than that. And the same is true of employment. No, we can't get into their role. We can't tell whether they're managerial. So for example, people that have to go to work before 7 o'clock in the morning, my guess is that they're, a lot of them are hospital workers that have to be there, aides, RNs, and so forth, LPNs, and other fast food workers too, that have to open. So that's usually what we find, but we can't get into that level of detail in the data, because we can't get into that level of detail in asking the questions.
Got it. Thank you.
Next question, Simi?
Yeah, thank you. I see this was a random survey of riders. Were we on every bus route in October 2024, or were those randomly selected as well?
We run every route.
Very good. Any other questions? Yes, Susan?
Yeah, just to follow up on Simi, and again, excellent work, Hugh, thank you. So on every route, but scattered through the month, did you chart how many times you were doing surveys, say, in the evening versus daytime? I mean, how correlated is this? I know the number you said, it felt good because it's a strong enough survey, but just every route they're running, was it 14, 16 hours a day? So just curious how you scattered that throughout the month of October.
What we do is take a random sample of runs or blocks that the drivers are assigned to, and we put a surveyor to follow that driver. And if some of these shifts are actually longer than 8 hours, but they'll be with them all day long. But they may start at 4 a.m. or whenever your service starts, and the sample will encompass the entire scope of the service day. In other words, the runs are randomly sampled, but we make sure that we're covering every part of the day, that the entire span of service is what I'm trying to say. So in answer to your question, yeah, it's comprehensive in terms of time and route.
Very good. Jesse, you had a question?
Yeah, I had a question about the slide 12, the information on sense of security. Is there a breakdown in the large report about with demographic info, a demographic breakdown? In particular, I'm thinking about perceived sense of security, based on gender identity or age, things like that.
Yes, the answer is yes. It is broken down.
Okay. Thank you. I'll look forward to looking into that.
Mike?
Thank you for your report, Hugh. I have a question that involves the sampling that was partially answered by questions from Simi and Susan. And it really involves, but based on the way the survey was made, is there any kind of weighting in terms of the number of people that are on certain routes at certain days, at certain times, and so forth? Does it kind of represent an average of all the riders, or is it not do that?
It does that. It's complex, and the interesting thing to me is how similar the results are year to year. There is a lot of consistency from year to year, and we use the same sampling methodology again and again. We use the same sampling methodology for TheRide as we do for a system that serves Westchester County, New York, and carries 30 million trips a year. We take a random sampling of the runs and make sure we cover the entire span of service. Um, it the randomness is very important because that is what gives you the opportunity to use statistics based on random sampling. The concept of randomness, random selection means that everybody has an equal chance of being participating in the survey. And if you do that consistently and you do it over time, you'll find a very consistent kind of result. So the answer is that yes, it is done. We don't start out by saying we're going to sample so many people route by route. What we do is take random samples of the runs that the drivers are making, and then we take a summary of how many responses we have gotten for each route, or route, as they say in Michigan. And then if it's a little bit off by from the ridership record, if let's say we have on Route X, we have a little more than we need to have, than we should have, according to the ridership data, we weight those numbers down a little bit. If we have too few, we weight them up a little bit. What we avoid is making any large weighting adjustments, because the random sampling is done so carefully that we end up with even if we didn't weight the data, you would have a very consistent set of results just because of the random sampling technique that we use. I hope
Okay,
I'm
yeah.
answering your question. I'm not sure.
Yes, you did. Thank you. I see really it goes beyond what I just said in my question. But yes, that answers it, although there's one other part of my question that I didn't mention. And that is, how is the survey, the people that are on a bus that are going to be surveyed, how is it, does everybody have the opportunity to take the survey, and some do and some don't? How does that work?
That's exactly right. We have a very high cooperation rate, though. That's generally exceeds 80%, which in terms of surveys nowadays is tough to get. But the way we do it is we train temporary workers in how to approach people. We select as best we can among the temporaries people that have a little bit of an engaging personality. We teach them to smile. We teach them how to ask people to cooperate. And we teach them to expect people to cooperate. We don't want them to go to, if they're going to hand you a questionnaire, we don't want them to say, well, gee, here, I got a survey. Would you mind filling it out? That's not what we do. We have them approach people and say, I have a survey here for TheRide. Please fill it out and give it back to me before you leave the bus. And people feel very obligated. They're approached by someone in person, asked to do something, and they tend to do it. The other part of your question is, does everybody get a chance? And the answer is yes. They are instructed to approach everyone on the bus. Now, occasionally, a bus is so packed that that's really not possible. And so we admittedly fall a little bit short, but that doesn't happen very often.
Okay, thank you. I have one other question, but I think that would be more addressed to Matt. The one slide that I found the most interesting and somewhat surprising was the one about vehicle availability. And between, it was 2009 and 2024, the riders that did have a vehicle available dropped in half, from about 40% to 20%. I found that may be disturbing. And I'm wondering if we have an answer to that or some speculation about that, because that perhaps also offers an opportunity that we can do more in terms of engaging people who do have cars and who are driving.
Okay. I mean,
Well, let me,
if 50%, I mean,
let
if
me take Matt
50%
off
is
the hook
under
for a minute.
27, right? They don't drive as much. It totally makes sense.
Does somebody have an answer to that question?
I think I do. Well,
Hugh, did
maybe
you have-
Hugh does,
I
but
started
Did
to
you-
say
you-
that we examined the relationship of income to this, and of course, the lower the income, the more likely you are to not have a vehicle available. But we don't find enough change in income to explain the variance in vehicle availability. So something else is going on, possibly inflationary pressures, but something else is going on. And we don't know what that is.
Yeah, as I said, that I think should be concerning to us, and also maybe is a good area to address and be an opportunity, I hope.
Any other questions? Did you have a question, Julie?
I mean, I can speculate that if over 50% of our riders are 27 and younger, and they're taking relatively short trips, and we look at what the change has been in the number of residents that are living in more dense areas, like in the downtown, there might be some income reasons, but I also think a lot of younger people just aren't driving or not owning cars because we have more housing where they don't bring them anymore. So,
Do we have any other questions for Hugh? I do have one for you, Hugh, and I'm not sure. So we have a total of 1,707 people surveyed, and we did it across the entirety of our ridership coverage area. One of the things that our board is struggling with is, ridership versus coverage and how things parse out in the individual municipalities, so Ann Arbor specifically, Ypsi and Ypsi Township. Is there a breakdown of possibly how many surveyed were in the Ann Arbor area versus how many surveyed were in the Ypsi or Ypsi Township area? Or is that not a consideration?
Oh, yeah, we can do that. It's in the larger report.
Okay, good. I look forward to reading that report.
Mhm.
Yes, Jesse?
May I have sorry, one more question. Looking at slide 7, the origin destination pairs. I want to make sure that I'm looking at that I'm reading it right. The list of cities that are color coded on the left, that's the origin, and then going across, that's the destination that people from each of those municipalities are traveling to.
Well, it really doesn't matter because let me see if I can, you're still seeing the shared screen, right?
Yes. Yep, we're still seeing it. So we're seeing slide 19 right now.
Trying to back up to that. Okay. It's 57%, for example, are originating in Ann Arbor, which is the top, the x-axis, and goes horizontally, and they end up in Ann Arbor. So it's Ann Arbor to Ann Arbor. So it really doesn't matter which way you read it. They're originating in Ann Arbor and going to Ann Arbor.
So looking at the bottom row, we're looking at originating in Ann Arbor, going to Ann Arbor is 57%.
Yep.
Originating in Ann Arbor, going to Ypsilanti City is 8.3%. Now, that can't work both ways because trips that originate in Ypsilanti City, the row above, that end in Ann Arbor is 3.1%. So it looks like this is.
No, wait. The people that originate in Ann Arbor, running down that column, people that originate in Ann Arbor 3.1% say they end up in Ypsilanti City.
Okay.
People that originate in Ypsilanti City, if you run down, 8.3 of those people say they're going to Ann Arbor.
Okay. All
Okay.
right, thank you. That was the clarification I needed.
Yeah. And keep in mind, this is a percentage of all the ride's riders. There's another way to look at this would be to separate the people out that are, for example, we could do such that each of these columns represents 100%. So we could look at all the people originating in Ann Arbor, what percent of those people go to Superior Township, Zio Township, Pittsfield, and so forth. But that's not the way we did it here. This is a percentage of all riders.
Yes, Susan?
I'm sorry to belittle this, but is this a perception or is this a reality? So if I live in Scioto Township, my address is Ann Arbor 48103. Do I know that I live in Scioto? I mean, this is a perception. Do they know they live in Pittsfield Township? I mean, do they know they live in Ypsi Township versus Ypsi City? Again, the perception may not be the same thing as their reality.
That's
Wait.
true. When we're dealing with fairly large units, though, it's probably reasonably accurate. When take the Westchester County problem in New York, for example. If people say they originate in the Bronx, well, we're not sure they do. They may be in Yonkers. They think they're in the Bronx, and that's what we care about for that purpose. The same applies here. If they think they are originating, if they say they're originating in Ann Arbor, that's probably right. They probably know that they're originating their trip in Ann Arbor. And if they say they're going to Ypsilanti Township, 1.3% of all riders, maybe there's some slop there. Maybe it's not quite precise. Because of exactly what you mentioned. I'm not sure that it's terribly important that we are precise there, but you're right, it is perception. And their definition of the boundaries is not precise. We can't measure that. We have no way to do that.
Yeah, just to sort of finish it up, because we're dealing especially with a very young ridership, and many 20-year-olds don't know exactly where they live. They just know they got this apartment on Washtenaw. Which community am I living in? It's probably a tough question for some of them. So it's helpful to understand the methodology so that we're not using this as, because I'm very struck that there's so little ridership from Ypsilanti coming to Ann Arbor. And if I think of Route 4 as just an example, or Packard Route 5, those are strong riderships from communities outside Ann Arbor, but their perception may be that they've been in Ann Arbor the entire experience. So, thank you. Sorry to belittle it. Thanks.
Do we have any other questions from the board? Thank you so much, Hugh. I think we've closed out your portion. We appreciate you coming to visit us, and we look forward to reading the entirety of your report. And I'm wondering if Ken Anderson is still with us and if he had any closing thoughts. Or Hugh, if you have a closing thought before we get to Ken.
No, let's go to Ken.
Okay.
I appreciate the opportunity to talk.
No, I just want to say thank you to Hugh. That was great. Every time you put one of these together, I learned something new as well. And we will work with Hugh to come up with a more detailed version of the report in the upcoming weeks or so.
We appreciate that.
Thank you, everybody.
Okay, thank you. I'm
Thank
going to
you all.
sign up. Bye-bye.
Good night. Next on our agenda is the Ypsilanti Transit Center update with Mr. Forrest Yang. Oh, do you have something, Kyra?
It wasn't a question for Hugh. I just wanted to say while we were still on slide 7, I think this is helpful when the board goes into its discussion on ends. I don't remember when that occurs, but to me, a lot of that presentation sort of emphasized the need to really prioritize ridership. I think that 86% of all trips within Ypsi Township, Ypsilanti, and Ann Arbor was pretty, not surprised. Yeah, I guess I was surprised that it was that high. And I think we really probably need to focus on increasing the strength within those places as opposed to focusing more on sprawl, not just based on this itself, but there were lots of little pieces within the presentation that made me think ridership, ridership, ridership. So I think that's a discussion for the board and having this kind of fresh in your mind when you go into those conversations on ends.
That's a very good point. Thank you. Now we will go ahead and move on to Mr. Forrest Yang. Thank you for allowing that sidebar, Forrest.
Oh, no worries. Thank you. Good evening, everybody. On your board packet, page 34, the Ypsilanti Transit Center project just has reached another milestone. Now we have a recommended design for the building and also a preliminary site plan. So I know Grant Chan, the project manager, Grant Chan's here, just give you an overview of those design, update on the project process, and the next steps. Thank you.
There's a little button down.
Oh. Oh, I'm good? Oh, yeah, there we go. Okay. Thank you for having me. I'm glad to be back. I think most people know me, but I just want to introduce myself. I'm Gretchen Johnson, Senior Project Manager in the Planning and Innovation Division, and the Project Manager for the Ypsilanti Transit Center Reconstruction Project. So I wanted to go through a little bit update of the project. It's been about 9 months since I spoke with you last in July of last year. There's been a lot of work that we've completed over those 9 months. And as Forrest said, we've made it to a significant milestone. So I wanted to come here and give you all an update. So today we'll go through that, plus looking at the site development, preliminary site development and some conceptual renderings, as well as the cost estimate and next steps for the project. Okay, so I'll actually skip right to kind of the middle here. Well, we started the project in fall of 2023, so we've been working for about 18 months. Last I came to you all was last July, August, with the site concept selection. And once we've had that approved, we have been working to take that, refine that site concept further, and working hard over the fall and winter to develop the, or refine that concept, take the design to the next steps. The other big piece that we've been working on is continuing collaboration with our partners, other stakeholders in the public, and particularly FTA. So the FTA process, or the NEPA process with the FTA, has been ongoing since January of 2024. And I'm sure some of you heard last fall we did some archaeological sampling in October at the recommendation of our consultants because of nearby Native American settlements. And so once we had worked through all of that, we submitted another draft, actually a second draft of our NEPA in December. And the FTA felt that it was in a good place to share with the Michigan State Historic Preservation Office. So it's called the Section 106 consultation process. So that's where we're at today, working with, it's really an FTA and SHPO process, but working to respond to SHPO's comments and waiting for them to get back, and then FTA has an additional opportunity to review. And so hopefully we can work through that NEPA process within the next few months. That's probably somewhat ideal. We're not exactly sure how to how to gauge the time that it'll take, but hopefully we can get that finished within the next few months. So then to go right into some of the design that we've been working on. This is still a preliminary site development. We've been working closely with the city of Ypsilanti to develop this. You can see that the footprint and overall location of the transit center is still along Pearl Street, with the front entrance along kind of facing the corner of Pearl and Washington. So exactly what the concept showed last summer, but then we've developed around it a bit with adding places for drop-off, for things like kiss and ride or ride hailing, sharing, and as well as demand response services. So that was one of the big findings from our spring engagement last year, was a focus on multimodalism. It's not shown on here, but we also have planning for bike parking. And so trying to think about the whole platform area and where to put not only the fixed route buses, but other transit. So the next slide is just a quick comparison to where the existing, or how the existing site looks with the existing YTC on that southwest corner. The whole red area actually, it includes the canopy. So the proposed new YTC is over 3 times larger than the existing one. And the platform has over, or nearly doubling the amount of, or number of buses that fit on the platform. So the next slides get into some of this conceptual renderings. So this would be looking at the front of the building from Pearl, like kind of right in the middle of the block. If you can imagine Bellflower, I think it's pretty much right there. And the idea behind this was to really help guide people visually to the front of the building, but then also to make some separation between the public area and the driver area. And so the door sort of in the middle of the building is actually just for drivers and staff. This is another view on Pearl, kind of more towards the corner of Pearl and Washington, looking at the front entrance. And then this would be looking down the diagonal bus drive aisle through the middle of the parking lot. So that's the rear entrance, again, hoping to make sure that both the rear and the front of the building are very visually attractive, since people will be circulating along both sides of the building with buses surrounding it. And then the last view is from the bus drive aisle, looking at the back of the the rear of the building. It's not, not going to really look like the rear of a building, but that's the back. And then to quickly go through the floor plan. So this has been through numerous iterations, and I think we've got it to a place where it's pretty much finalized. So to kind of quickly go through it, the pink and orange-ish areas are where the drivers and staff will be. The area at the far west end is the driver break room. And then the information specialists in the pink area, they have a nice view of the public waiting and bathrooms, which are the light blue. And then these support areas for mechanical, storage, and electrical, things like that. So that won't be accessible to the public, but our maintenance staff primarily. To move into the project, the cost estimate, based on this current design and floor plan, we are estimating around 19 million. That does include sort of the whole 9 yards. It includes demolition. We will have to do some sort of interim operations. So it includes all of that, plus the remaining design and engineering, the development, continuing the design, and then also some sustainability features, such as solar panels and green building materials and Green Globe certification. We used green globes to help us kind of frame the sustainability of the building. And so there's various different programs. I'm sure you've probably heard of LEED and other things like that, but we liked this Green Globe certification and are hoping to build as much as possible of that certification into the building. Sustainability was one of the other major takeaways from our spring engagement last year. So this number does not include the land acquisition costs. So that's the main thing that doesn't include. We do have some ability to scale this number based on available funding. So we'll see where we land, but right now we're aiming for right around 19 million. So for next steps, one of the primary purposes I wanted to come to you all today is the opening of another engagement period this spring. So it runs from today through May 23rd. So looking for people to learn more about the project, look at these renderings, provide their feedback. So we'll take all those comments and of course summarize them, try to build them into the project. And then really trying to focus on finalizing the categorical exclusion with documentation, the NEPA process. Again, hopefully that's coming to an end in a couple months. We'll see. And then continuing to pursue funding opportunities. One of the grant opportunities that we have been targeting has historically come out around this time, so we're keeping an eye out for that. And continuing to closely work with the City of Ypsilanti and other project partners to develop the project and to start thinking about how we actually implement and deliver the project. So that is actually all I have. Would love to hear any questions, though.
Thank you, Gretchen. And does anyone have a question? Jesse, and then Mike.
Thank you, Gretchen. I wanted to ask a little bit more about the multi-purpose room. Could you talk about how the concept for that space developed in your conversations with the city and based on all the public feedback? Because I know that was something that came up a lot in the early discussions and with community members. So I was hoping to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah. No, thank you for the question. So yeah, as you can see, the floor plan, what Jesse's referring to is the small multi-purpose room, that slightly darker blue area. And it has evolved quite a bit over time. We've worked with the City of Ypsi to understand what they need. There's been some great ideas in terms of trying to have community mental health or some other space for security and potentially police in the building. And we worked with the City of Ypsi to understand what sort of size of room they would need for those uses. And so we've landed on this kind of smaller 200 square foot area and still working with the City of Ypsi to kind of figure out exactly what that looks like. We don't have a firm idea, but been a lot of good ideas in terms of making it of use to the community.
So, so at this point, has there been any talk about maybe, as we said, there's a lot of groups that would be interested in this, and how that space gets shared among, or how it's determined who gets to use the space at any given time?
That's a good question. We haven't gotten that far yet in terms of making sure that we have that all nailed down. We haven't progressed that far in our discussions with the City of Ypsi. So still very in flux.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any other questions? Susan? Oh, Mike, I'm sorry. I said you next. And then Susan.
Thank you, Gretchen.
Yes.
Couple of quick questions.
Sure.
Your current estimate is 19 million excluding land. What was it when you talked to us last time, was it relative to the 19 million?
So the last time I spoke, I didn't provide an estimate.
okay.
Right. It is, though, in line with the FY25 budget. It's landing very close to what we've estimated. You know, we still have a lot to go in terms of the design, but right now, and we did these projections back in December, January, but right now they're landing very close to what we projected, and we do have some contingency in that number with the uncertainty that we're facing now in construction and materials. So we're hoping that we can stay in that range and are on target, but time will tell.
Okay, thanks. Second question is, you had mentioned twice, I believe, in your presentation about working with partners. Who are the partners that you consider partners?
Well, so our biggest one is City of Ypsilanti. And then we have been, of course, working with a lot of different departments internally to TheRide. We have a design team that meets regularly. But then externally, we did last spring, we held a luncheon that had a lot of other staff from the city of Ypsilanti, but also like the library, police chief, and elected officials. And so we're doing that again this spring, and we'll be hearing from them to make sure that their comments and feedback are incorporated into the project.
Okay, thank you.
Susan?
Hi, Gretchen.
Hi, Susan.
Couple questions. The first one is $19 million for 6,700 square feet. Seems like an extraordinarily, we're talking over $2,000 a square foot. Why, what are the contributors to why a transit center, which is basically a box, why would it be that expensive? What are the elements?
That's an excellent question. So actually where we started was around 1,000 square feet, 1,000 per square feet, $1,000 per square feet. But then once you add on contingency and of course the design and engineering is in that number as well, that's where we get to the 2,000 plus sustainability features. And really it's, we did a lot of vetting because that number surprised us quite a bit. But it's kind of the reality of construction with the materials and building in an urban environment. So there really wasn't like one thing that drove up the cost. It was really building on already kind of a high number, surprising number for the cost of construction today, and then building on those other costs in terms of the sustainability and other soft costs.
I totally believe you, but yeah, it just seems like an incredible number. It just absolutely, but I know you've done the work. The other question is just one of design.
Sure.
You may remember years ago, there was a design for bus shelters on Fifth that faced to the west, and they had kind of an awning on them. You remember those? Well, they were lovely to look at, but proved to be absolutely ineffective on keeping the rain out, the sunshine out, because it was a due west. And I am looking at this canopy, which is up in the air, and it looks like the souls who are on the back of the building are going to get nice shade and wind block. But the folks on the west face are going to have the same challenge that we gave them when we did the bus shelters on Fourth. It doesn't protect you from the rain and the wind. It doesn't protect you from the sun. So it's almost decorative, but not really a weather protector. Did some part of the design team do a design, you can use computer modeling to sort of get a sense of what wind and sun might do for people standing on that side of the building?
So that's an excellent question. We haven't gotten to that point in the design process, but that's absolutely something we can do. I hear you. I've sat out on 4th Avenue, and so I totally understand where you're coming from.
Yeah, that I just, again, because we want this is the once in a lifetime, and we're so proud of it, but that if it doesn't do what it's supposed to do, it's just decorative, and it's a cost that doesn't help our patrons.
Sure. Yep, absolutely. Yeah, we'll take a look at that.
Thank you. Yeah, that was my other question. Thank you.
Yes, Matt?
Yeah, if I might, I wanted to add something to Gretchen's point. I think your question was about the square footage of the building versus the project cost?
Yeah, I was looking at 19 million and 6,700 square feet.
Sure.
Yeah.
Don't forget the rest of the facility, the bus bays, the concrete for the platform. When we talk about designing a passenger terminal, we can actually function without a building at all. What matters is the bus bays and how they're organized around a central platform. We put buildings on them because that's the right thing to do, and it allows you to provide services and a break spot and bathrooms and all those things. I would argue perhaps the most important part of it is that concrete platform, which is a considerable cost. I don't know the breakdowns myself, but that is probably, I don't know if it's half the cost of the entire project or possibly more, but it's a lot, concrete, asphalt, design going into it. So I just wanted to add that in there. It's not just the square footage of the building, it's the functioning of the entire facility.
Thank you. Any other questions?
Thank you.
I actually have three.
Sure.
My first question is, I'm looking at your very first rendering that shows the transit center with the existing buildings of the residential and commercial, and then the city parking lot in the back and the staff parking lot.
Yep.
Who is funding the staff parking lot and the city parking lot? Are we partnering with anybody for that, or is that also part of the 19 mil?
That is part of the 19 million for our costs. Because we will, well, the staff parking lot will be for our use. The city parking lot, we are using that for construction. I mean, we haven't gotten to the point of understanding exactly how we phase it all, but the existing lot is in poor condition. And so once we have heavy construction equipment and all of that out there, it's going to be even more poor condition. That will be asphalt, and it's a fairly cheap, inexpensive material that we can, and we also need to develop the new entrance off of Adams Street. So because of how we are orienting our building, we are closing off access to the existing drive is on Washington Street, so we need to add that new access off of Adams. And so that will be part of our cost to pave that, bring it up to code, and add that new driveway off of Adams.
Very good. My other question is, in the staff parking lot, I see that you have like a drop-off area. As I'm thinking about, so we have TheRide East over there. We also have people who use paratransit and then come into the transit center. Is that what you're thinking that drop-off area is going to be, so that people who are taking, like I said, TheRide West, they would have a safe place to be dropped off to be able to meet their connection of fixed route?
So that could be one scenario. We haven't finalized this. You also see on Washington Street the vehicles close to the plaza there. Mm-hmm. That's actually where we, again, this is all conceptual, but one area where we discussed the TheRide and TheRide stop to be, so that people have very close and easy access to the front door of the facility. We might end up needing that as for a fixed route bus, but we're working to put TheRide and TheRide on the platform so that they have really nice access to the building. And the drop off in the parking lot would be more for ride share, kiss and ride, people, separate from the rides uses, but still transportation.
And then my final question is on the interior of the building with regards to the public restrooms. So I'm thinking about the Blake Transit as it sits now. So you have the male restroom and the female restroom, and then there's a family restroom so that people who need to do diaper changes, that sort of thing. Or if you have multiple family members, it's very hard to squeeze into those tiny bathrooms. Your rendering has it split in half. So when you are making those restrooms, you're going to take into effect that you may need changing tables, or are you making room for a family restroom in here?
This is a good catch. I messed up a little bit. The area, that square just above the public restrooms, that's actually a family restroom. So, sorry, it should have been blue. It's yellow on there, but it should have been blue.
Thank you. That was all of my questions.
Yep.
And just to circle back, does the board have any other follow-up questions for Gretchen? Yes, Rich?
I just had one quick one. So Blake, right, has the air ride and the A2D2 spot in the front. I wasn't sure, because I know right now we don't have like an Ipsy to Detroit route, but maybe the RTA will eventually do something like that. But I wasn't sure if the existing or the upcoming platform is going to just incorporate that, like a spot for air ride and also a potential Ipsy D2, or if that's going to be like Washington or Adams Street as the locations for those.
Yeah, that's something we've been thinking about. Unfortunately, we have, our projections would show that we need all the positions that are on the platform for the YTC. So we would not have the ability right now to have regional buses on this platform. But it is something that we've thought about. There is a stop on Adams Street that's an older stop that's still pretty much there. That might be a good spot for regional buses. But it is tough to incorporate them on the platform because we think we'll need them all for our own service.
Great. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. We're going to move on now to Ms. Dina Reed. Is she available? Okay. She will be coming to us via Zoom, and we're going to hear about transit funding, part 1.
And Madam Chair, if I might, while you were getting set up, we have 2 education items here on money this evening for you. They kind of complement each other, and I just wanted to let you know. Item 6.3, Ms. Reed will be providing you with an overview of how federal transit funding works. You've asked us for education on how the money works. We're breaking it into chunks and starting with federal. After that, Jeff and I will give you a presentation of some of the recent things that have changed in just the last couple of months, and that's mostly with the climate. So Dina's is about how things work. Ours is about the context in which it's working right now. You are certainly free to ask Dina questions after her presentation. But I just wanted to let you know we're going to come right after that and talk about Trump's executive orders, the new reauthorization bill, and some of the other things that are more recent. So you may find some of your answers in that second presentation as well.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Dina.
Hi, everybody. Thank you. So I think we're just waiting for the presentation to come up, and while we're doing that, I'll just kind of give a short lead in to follow up with what Matt said. What I'm going to do today is just talk to you very briefly about basically all the different ways that transit agencies get funding. And I'm going to give you kind of a high level overview of the things we're going to cover over the next maybe several sessions of informational topics that we're covering. And the first one that we're going to talk about in a little more detail today, albeit still somewhat of a high level, but get into some of the detail about how federal funding works for transit agencies. So thank you, Deb, for bringing up the presentation. Let's start with the next slide. So first of all, as I said, I want to give you an overview of public transit funding and how transportation system gets funded, or transportation systems like ours. So this is illustrative of all the different funding sources that we have. You'll notice there are dollar signs going into the circles and then arrows going out of the circles. What we're mostly going to talk about, when I talk about each topic, I'm going to talk about where the money comes from, how it gets into the funding pot, and then how then that funding gets distributed. And today we're going to talk about federal funding. in a little more detail. But I just want to share briefly, our transit agency gets federal funding, state funding, local funding, and other funding. The federal portion, like I said, we're going to talk about today. State funding we'll talk about probably next time, and then follow up with local. Other funding sources are things that we get, like property tax revenues and other sources of funding. So today, let's focus on federal funding, starting with the next slide. So the primary sources of federal transit funding, the primary source really is the Highway Trust Fund, and now the general fund. So let's talk just a little bit about the Highway Trust Fund. The Highway Trust Fund has been around for a long, long time. The most recent model that we work from really originated in 1956. And when that trust fund was first established, the funding, the cents per gallon was 3 cents per gallon back in 1956. As you might imagine, raising the gas tax has long been controversial at best. And so because of that, it's really only changed on 4 separate occasions since 1956. The most recent change was in 1993, which set the gas tax at 18.4 cents per gallon, and diesel at 24.4. So again, it's been that way since 1993. So as you might imagine, over time, pressures on the funding have grown. The buying power has estimated to be about 53% of what it used to be, because of the time that's passed, not to mention inflation and other factors driving up costs. So just something to note, that the reason that Congress has started to add funding to fill the shortfall is because the Highway Trust Fund hasn't been sufficient in covering costs to fund transportation or public transportation. So this money is used for transportation. And when you break it down, how we get it, essentially, it gets broken down from the Highway Trust Fund. About 80% of the Highway Trust Fund money goes to a highway trust account, or more specifically, Highway Trust Fund within the trust fund, which funds the blue boxes and among other things, but primarily those blue boxes that are on the lower left, the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Ford Motor Carrier, and Federal Highway Administration, which many of you, I'm sure, are quite familiar with. About 20% of the Highway Trust Fund money actually goes to fund public transportation through the FTA. So that's kind of the first step of where funding comes from and how that, and next we're going to talk a little bit more about how the funding goes through the Mass Transit Fund into the FTA and to the level in which we will use it. But just to give you an order of magnitude before we move on, the Highway Trust Fund in FY 2024 generated $42.5 billion. And again, that didn't fund all of the transportation, but it was what was generated by the Highway Trust Fund. It was a 0.8% increase over the prior year. And as you know, that's not keeping up with inflation. So that kind of goes to that point that I was talking about. So before I move on, I can't see all of you in the room. I just want to take a pause and see if anybody has any questions about this portion.
Dina, we don't seem to have any questions. We're good to go.
Right, thank you. Next slide talks just a little bit about transportation reauthorization, and I've added a fun comic here, but basically what happens in reauthorization is to take the money from the Mass Transit Fund and authorize the funding that we have for use in public transportation. There are bills that get passed that are called reauthorization bills. What these bills do is they tell us how we can spend the money, what the priorities are. It sets priorities and funding for multiple years at a time, usually 5 years, sometimes as much as 6. And it's important because it's how we start the process to get the funding that's provided to us. And generally speaking, Congress, this is Congress's job, is to set reauthorization. Generally, what happens in reauthorization is a majority of the funding goes towards current programs or current things that are already funded, with maybe some special things that they want to fund related to, in this particular chart, graphic, safety, climate, repair, equity. So little bits of that are do change over time, but a majority of it goes towards capital spending for projects that are kind of already in the pipeline, or the types of projects that we've been doing over time, taking care of our transportation systems, funding our capital needs. Next slide. So something to know about reauthorization is there are several risks for transit agencies in reauthorizations. As I mentioned, reauthorizations are multiple years at a time, but they're very, very large. For instance, reauthorization over the years, you can see here for the IIJA, the most recent authorization we are operating within right now is IIJA. That was a $643 billion reauthorization for a 5-year period from FY 2022 to FY 26. And I'm showing you the history here just so you can see what happens logistically in this. Reauthorizations take at least 18 months typically from start to finish to get to a point, and that's the ideal scenario. So what happens is lots of things happen, and there isn't agreement about how that money should be spent, or where the money is going to be funded from. So there have always been extensions to the reauthorization bills to keep funding flowing in the event that the new bill is not passed on time. So just mention this because we're heading into the final year of IIJA, which expires in 2026. Technically, the funding program expires September 30th of 2025, but it provides funding for fiscal year 2026. So we have through 2026 to pass a new reauthorization. And I mention it because it is something that we think about when we think about planning projects. Extensions are helpful in that you can kind of keep the status quo for a little while, but it also is uncertain about what will happen in the next reauthorization. So when you're talking about funding projects that are multi-year, it can really cause uncertainty about how much funding you're going to have, because it's really driving all of the funding that we have. I also want to mention that these figures here on this slide are for all of transportation, not just public transportation. So to give you an example, the 643 billion for IIJA really funded essentially 21.4 billion for public transportation. So I just wanted to kind of break that down per year. That's on average. It was 21.4 billion per year. So a total of around 128 billion for IIJ for public transportation. The other funding goes to the areas that we just talked about in the former slide, the 80% of the other areas that get the funding. So before I go on, do we have any questions about how this kind of works or what some of the risks are? Okay.
Dina, we're good to go.
Okay. There's also time at the end, as Matt said, but I just want to kind of pause in between. So from this slide into the next one, I'm kind of trying to show you the progression of what happens. So Congress passes a 5-year reauthorizations. And what that does is divides that mass transit fund, that 20%, into 2 buckets, formula funding and discretionary funding. This is where these are terms that you've probably heard me say on several occasions. And so I want to explain just a little bit what this is about. So the annual, this is the reauthorization bill for the reauthorization. There's also an annual appropriation, which I'm going to talk a little bit more on the next slide, but I wanted to mention formula funds are funds that direct our FTA or public transportation oversight administrative body to distribute funds using a specific formula. I'll talk a little bit more about the formulas on the next slide. And then the discretionary funds are specific grant programs that the administration wants to fund during the reauthorization period. And those funds are where a majority of the discussions come when the reauthorization bill is there. I mean, there's a certain amount of money that kind of tends to stay with formula because that's the money that's most agencies rely on day to day for all of the state of good repair and things that we mentioned in our capital budgeting process. Just taking care of the facilities that we have. So a big portion of what the government supports is taking care of current infrastructure, replacing facilities when they need to be replaced and vehicles and so on. So this is really a bipartisan issue. Most legislators are in favor of formula funding because they know that any issues with this funding could significantly impact public transportation in their communities and their service areas. Discretionary funds, again, defines who is eligible, what projects are eligible, what the program criteria is. But those are funds that can be passed from different, more or less in different programs. So I'm going to go on to the next slide because that talks more specifically about some of this. And as we do that, I want to
Dina?
mention, yes.
If I may, we have a
Yeah.
question from the board real quick. I have Julie wanting to ask a question.
Thank you. Sorry, this is incredible, Gina. Thank you. What percentage goes in, and maybe if you were about to say this, I apologize. What percentage goes to formula and what percentage goes to discretionary typically?
So let me take a quick look because I just want to give you the right information.
Even just ballpark is.
Yeah, I would say probably 30, probably about, it's not just, I would say probably about 60%, 70% is going into formula, but that can change, like I said, depending on the reauthorization. But I would say over a majority of the funding is going towards formula funding, and then the rest is going towards other programs.
Thank you so much.
Mhm.
Thank you, Dina.
You're welcome. Okay, so moving on, this kind of gives you a little bit more tangible information about formula funding and discretionary funding. And going into this slide, I do want to mention here that in addition to the reauthorization of multi-year funding, Congress also has to pass annual appropriations. And they do that every year. And when annual appropriations aren't completed by the end of a fiscal year, that's when you'll hear about continuing resolutions. So difference between reauthorization and continuing resolution is that the continuing resolutions apply to the annual appropriation and the extensions relate to the multi-year reauthorizations. So in addition to telling us, what programs they want to fund, when we get into the annual appropriation, we're really splitting up now exactly what that money can be used for. So to give you an example, you've heard us mention on several occasions numbers of grant programs, 5307, 5339, those types of things. And so here what I've done is outline for you on the right the different types of funding that we receive that we're eligible for as an urban agency by formula or discretionary. So formula funding, like I said, is that base funding that we rely on every year to fund our state of good repair and things like that. We get 53, that's primarily 5307 funding, which is urbanized area funding. And we also get 5339 funding, which is bus and bus facilities. We get a small amount of money for seniors and individuals with disabilities, and we get funding for CMAQ. And those are all different types of formula funding that are included in reauthorizations every five years, and then also annually in terms of specifically how to fund different programs. Another part, like I mentioned before, is discretionary, which is the one that changes the most in terms of what gets funded. We get 5339 bus and bus facilities funding every year. And we've also been awarded a low-no, a discretion, that's a low-no discretionary grant as well. So you can see we have two 5339s. One is for formula. That's money we get, part of it is part of the formula. And then we also get a discretionary portion because we had awarded the low-no grant. We're also, we do not get CIG grants or New Starts grants, but that's something that we're gonna probably be pursuing to try and get funding for our long-range plan. So I wanted to mention it here. And then we get other discretionary federal funding, which is congressionally directed spending, or what we typically know as earmarks. So I wasn't gonna go through the specific criteria here, but I wanted to share with you just some criteria that is included in this process. And part of this process and awarding of the process for each type is that we do have to do a split letter because of the way our funding comes through the RTA. So one part of the process and the latter part of the process is how is the split between the urbanized areas. So when the funding comes to us, it gets split between where it was generated. So all of the money that we generate in our UZA gets, or in our area gets spent in our area, but we have to have a split letter with other transit agencies that roll up under RTA to make that happen. So that's just another technical component to getting our formula funding and our discretionary funding. But we're not guaranteed the discretionary funding. We have to go through the process of applying for it, which I think you're mostly familiar with since we just went through a significant process. But I'm happy to answer any more questions about that.
Actually, we do have a question, Susan.
Hi, Dina. So a question about the formula funding. Do we split that with the university since they have their own transit system? They're doing vehicle miles, the population and population density. Are we sharing that with the university? And is that funding what is then redirected to us as the form of the grant from the university for its ridership? So again, the formula funding, we share a population, but they have their own vehicle miles. How does this work? Is the university considered to be another transit agency?
No, they're not. We are the only recipient in this area. So all of the funding that comes from all of the formula funding that is generated in this area comes to us, to AAATA. And the credit for a portion of that that is attributable to U of M ridership is essentially reimbursed through our agreement with them, because they pay us a per user fee, and so there's a calculation that gets trued up annually so that they do get some credit for the funding that we receive that is actually operated and paid for by University of Michigan.
Good question. Any other Mike?
We have, of course, talked about quite a bit the fact that we had to use some federal funds for operations prior to the passing of our latest millage. And I'm wondering where and what we're looking at, I presume in the formula funding, did that come from?
So that came from our 5307 funding.
5307, okay.
Yeah, just an order of magnitude from FY22 through 2026, and I'm using that estimate because it's for the IIJA. Our 5307 funding on average for that period of time is 10.7 million annually. The 5339, which is the bus and bus facilities formula, was 1.3 million. So when you think about what our capital program looks like, for instance, for this fiscal year was over $37 million. You know that since we're not using any money from the reserve, we're using historical funding that we have gotten over the years. We're saving up for large projects. Like our roof project right now, our roof and HVAC project that's in process right now under construction. is approximately $10 million. So we are using funds from previous years that we have saved in order to complete that project in one season. So just to give you an order of magnitude, if we didn't do that, we would have to use 100% of our formula funding to fund just that one project. So fiscal management is very important when we're planning these projects, and the reauthorization is just as important.
Rich?
So a couple things around taxes. I assume that we don't get like a nonprofit status, because the thing I'm looking at, right, is like diesel tax, 24.4 cents per gallon, but we spend a lot on diesel. And I don't know if we get like a exempt status for having to pay that fuel tax on those. But the bigger picture question I had is, with the continued increase of EVs overall, I don't know how much or what the prediction is of when that line crosses of amount of actual gasoline sold versus tax recovery, that we're gonna basically be more in a deficit. I don't know if that's a calculation that the government, well, I assume the government maybe has looked into it, but I don't know what they're going to do if you've heard anything around, like, what are they gonna replace that fuel tax with, since we have so many more EVs on the road?
What I do know is that EVs and inflation have already have for years been making an impact on the total revenue collected by the Highway Trust Fund. And right now, one of the things that we've talked about, and I'm trying not to get too far into the political side of things, as I know there's more coming here with Matt and Jeff, but one of the things that we've talked about a little bit back and forth here is, the fiscal cliff and how it might impact us. And I think, and I know I've mentioned, especially during the budget time, that while we are in good financial position and I feel confident in our funding overall to maintain what we have for several years to come and through projection periods, the bigger fiscal cliff that we're facing is the potential depletion of the Highway Trust Fund, because we've been spending more than that fund can provide for many years. And some assumptions based on, current levels of what we receive, and also the general fund contributions already, are saying that the trust fund could be depleted by as early as 2028. So those are things that our government is fully aware of and grappling with. I don't have an answer on exactly when that will occur, specifically to your question, or how it will be rectified or addressed. But right now, it's been addressed by subsidizing transportation funding with the general fund.
Was that it? Okay. Any other questions for Dina? Seeing none, thank you, Dina. We'll close out this portion and we will move on, Mr. Carpenter, to economic climate and agency implications. Dina, are you hanging around for this part as well?
Ma'am, sure.
Okay, great.
Thank you.
Can you bring it up, Deb? And while we're doing that, I'll just make a couple of additions just to clarify and expand on a few things Dina has said. Quick reminder, she said it quickly. I want to simply remind everyone, everything we get from the feds is capital. The last federal direct operating stuff was done away with in the Reagan administration. So it's all capital. There's a small amount, as Mike remembered, that we can flex. That was the term where we can take capital funding and use it for operations. That was related to the operationalization of capital. So the labor costs to install that new engine. The engine is clearly capital, the labor costs, so it was a very small amount. I will sometimes refer to discretionary funding as competitive funding, because that's what it is. The formula funding, we don't do anything for it. It just shows up by virtue of the formula. The earmarks, the low-no grants, the bigger ones, we have to hustle for that. We may not win. Something Dina said is very important, I want to emphasize. When we win in one of those, we still get our formula funding. So as she was saying, If we get more competitive grants, that allows us to use those formula funds in other ways to fund other projects because it still comes in. So that's a big relief. Yeah, I think those are the things. So I should run the PowerPoint up there? No, I'll run it. Okay, so this is our second part, and yes, Dina will hang around, and I'm sure you will have more questions after this that she will be great to have with us. So what Jeff and I are going to do is really set the table for sort of questions I think you may have about how everything Dina just explained may or may not be changing, or could be changed, or maybe will stay the same, clear as mud. So we're going to give you a really high-level, quick review of some of the, the big changes at a federal level since inauguration, primarily in, executive actions, that next funding bill she talked about, and sort of the broader macroeconomic conditions that we're going to find ourselves in. So, as she said, why do we care so much? It's really mostly about the money for a public transit agency. 80 to 90% of our capital budget, as she said, is coming from the federal government. That is a U.S. specific thing. Other countries do it differently. We use mostly to maintain our state of good repair, our existing assets. We also rely on it to expand. That's what those competitive discretionary grants are for. Mostly the expansion, the big ticket items that a community might not be able to afford all on their own. But also for things like the low, no emissions grant, which I would call maybe a value added sort of grant. There is always strings attached to this money, and that's going to become important in some of the things I say. Lots of rules come along with these grants that we have to follow. There's also the legal framework that we operate within, regardless of the funding. We have to follow the ADA and discrimination laws and things like this. And there are enforcement mechanisms for that I'll mention. And just as we get started here, I want to reiterate something I've said before. So far, with all the changes that have happened, nothing has directly affected this agency. I know there have been a lot of effects in many parts of society over the last couple of months, and I don't mean to dismiss those in any way. I'm simply focusing this presentation on this agency and how it affects us, and our ability, frankly, to continue to deliver our services to the people who rely on us. So what has really changed? And, this is not a surprise or a secret. The Trump administration has had a very muscular and assertive approach to changing priorities at a federal level. A lot of it's happened through executive orders and things that are related to that. Very aggressive approach against DEI and climate action. We have the Department of Government Efficiency out there doing their thing, immigration enforcement, and of course, tariffs. Grants as leverage. This is kind of a new thing in this way. It's much more overt than I've ever seen it before in terms of do what we want or we'll take your money away. I'm sure you guys have seen the news about Harvard this week. That's one example, and there are many others outside of the transportation industry where we're seeing this. And one thing, the Dodge group is definitely doing is the cuts to federal staff. We know that the Federal Transit Administration did not escape this. There was a loss of staff there. That will affect us in terms of how fast things move, processing of things. It also can affect a variety of other things. If you're calling in about an enforcement issue, let's say you feel like you've been discriminated against, and there's no one to answer the phone to take your concern or to investigate that complaint, that obviously has the kind of effect of deregulation by layoffs, if you will. So reduction in force, I think, is the euphemism they're using. Below the White House, the president has a cabinet made up of secretaries. One of them is the Secretary of Transportation, Mr. Duffy. The Federal Transit Administration is just one section of the DOT. They are promulgating their own rules as these things sort of trickle down. What we're seeing here is an evolving list of preferences or priorities, and any new administration has some latitude to shape these things. We always see this when administrations change and the party in control of the White House changes. This is definitely more aggressive than is normal. So this administration very much not in favor of DEI or anything that looks like a preferential program with respect to staff. Climate action is verboten, and masks and vaccine mandates are also prohibited. Things that they're really liking, families, marriage and birth rates, user pays, cooperation with immigration enforcement. Some of these things, I have no idea how they're actually going to implement, giving out grants based on marriage and birth rates. I have never seen anything quite like that. I'm not sure how that would roll out. And we've received no guidance from the Federal Transit Administration about what the next grant is going to require us to do. So that's just out there. There's definitely, they've said, a focus on the hard economics of discretionary grants. If you're proposing an infrastructure project, how much is it going to cost? How much does it benefit? We want hard economic cost benefit ROI kind of numbers, as opposed to less tangible things that have been used in the past, like equity impacts, social justice, climate mitigation. Those were what I would call less tangible things. We're seeing this pendulum swing back much harder to a hard cost benefit grading of projects. And Republican administrations do tend to, every administration tends to, want their voters to feel the love. And we saw in the first Trump administration, a lot of discretionary grants go to rural or highway projects, as opposed to mass transit, which is in cities and tends to be a Democratic constituency. So that I would not be surprised to see that. Again, we are seeing these rules slowly be changed. Some of it is always been there. There's always been a caveat in every grant we get that says basically the federal government can change the conditions on this grant at any time we want for any reasons we want. Do you want the money, yes or no, with that condition? And the strings are attached. We expect this to get used quite a bit more in the coming years. At that point, I want to turn it over to Jeff to talk a little bit more about the reauthorization process that's going on right now.
Great. Thanks, Matt. So just wanted to add a few things on the reauthorization. I know Dina did a really in-depth explanation of reauthorization. I want to approach it from a little bit of the political angle. So as Dina mentioned, reauthorization is up in September 2026, so we're heading towards the last year of funding. There are instances if they are not able to come to an agreement at that point, they can do short extensions of the current iteration that has happened in a lot of years past, so don't be surprised if you see that. But really, it's a starting point under a new administration in a Republican-controlled Congress. As Dina mentioned, formula funds tend to be a little bit in the more safer category. However, the discretionary funds could be at risk. Looking at projects like CIG investments, which are typically light rail, subways, et cetera, those have become potential targets. I know in the previous past few days, we've seen an announcement of the administration taking over the Penn Station project. We've seen formula cutting for a light rail project in Texas. So kind of getting a sense of what might be on the table to be cut. But as it stands right now, we still do have our formula funds through September 2026, and then as you remember, they did not pass a FY25 fiscal bill, so we're operating under a continuing resolution, basically maintain formula funding at 24 levels through 25. But as you remember, I think I presented last board, any earmarks that were awarded in 25 did not make it through the continuing resolution. So just one of those things that it's hard to predict whether they will be kept. It's an annual conversation. I know we're currently working on earmark submissions and have a couple in for FY26 already. And as I mentioned, on reauthorization, expiration date of September 2026, as Dina mentioned, typically set for 5 years, could go a little bit further than that. discussions are already starting in DC on this. We're working with our federal lobbying team to kind of see what that looks like. I think one of the themes you'll see and has already been seen in this current administration is the deregulation aspect, cutting some of the bureaucratic red tape. And, that's something that we're looking at lists and will be presenting to our members of Congress and really just educating them on the importance of transportation funding. I think that's going to be really big in this. As I mentioned before, rail proposals and crosshairs, again, just one of the things the administration has their target on and could be cut. But in positive news, we are heading to DC in May. Matt, myself, Dina, and Jesse will be going to the APTA Ledge Conference, meeting with our members of Congress, hopefully meeting with Senator Slotkin. She was just elected. So our job really is working with APTA, Bus Coalition on the federal front to continue to educate and advocate for transportation funding and work with the administration to do the best we can.
Thanks, Jeff. And this is an example of where our work with our industry trade groups becomes very important. We will certainly go visit every door, every office of our own elected officials who are completely in the minority party at the moment and are not in the best position to influence this legislation as it takes place. There is a transit agency in almost every Republican jurisdiction in the country, and they all receive formula funding. And some of them are much more dependent on it even than we are, just to keep the lights on. So even Republicans tend to value things like formula funding and even discretionary funding in many cases. So APTA, the Bus Coalition, at a state level, the Michigan Public Transit Association, they help us expand our reach into jurisdictions where the majority party, our partners in other transit agencies can go speak to their Republican members and help them understand the importance of continuing these funds. So we're not completely isolated in that respect. And then finally on reauthorization, you each have this handout. It's from Transportation for America, a nice little nonprofit. This is the nicest sort of concise explanation of how the federal funding for transit, the reauthorization bill is crafted. It's a takeaway for you. Have a look at it. It's a good website as well. I encourage you to look at it. So just as we're finishing up here, getting ready for your questions, the broader economic climate, I think that's kind of where the biggest amount of uncertainty is really coming into these discussions. The formula funds, that stuff's stable for now. Reauthorization is we've been through this many times. What's happening now in the broader economic and social climate is not something that many of us have experienced before. So this is different. We've broken it down into a couple of basic buckets. The economic climate, as I'm sure you've heard, there's a lot of talk of tariffs going on, and this has knock-on effects for the broader economy. Broadly speaking, tariffs could slow the economy into recessionary territory. They could also kick up inflation. Hypothetically, they can do both at the same time, creating a condition called stagflation, which I haven't heard in many years. Really nasty piece of business that this country wrestled with in the 70s. You have low declining growth and high inflation at the same time. The problem with that is the Federal Reserve's mandate to fix this, they're the ones who control interest rates, is that they're working at cross purposes. When they if the inflation's running hot, they increase interest rates, but that's what drives down economic growth. In a recession, they would want to cut interest rates. So if you got both at the same time, their number one tool works against itself. So that's the trap of stagflation. It hasn't happened. I want to be clear about that, but we've heard a lot of discussions about it. We're also keeping our eyes on the national debt, which has hit fairly high historic level, and borrowing costs begin to get driven up. We saw the tariff discussion take a lot of flip-flopping in the last couple of days, in the last week, really because the US bond market trembled. And that really kind of gets to the question of confidence in the United States as an economic creature. So how all of these things can affect each other and combine in new ways is way beyond my ability to predict. How these, we're trying to avoid speculation here, but we are sort of scenario planning in our heads about how should we position ourselves with this, higher risk profile. So some implications for us, absolutely. Inflation would increase our costs if that is the situation we find ourselves in. So the $19-20 million budget you just heard from Gretchen on the Ypsilanti Transit Center, and she sort of nicely said it, I'll say it more directly. If costs of all the material in there are going up like they were a couple of years ago, we're going to have to revisit that number. And that would be a hard discussion, but if you do it, you do what you have to do. The social implications of a recession are troubling for the people we serve. If you have increasing, people out of work, how can we help? Well, we know that when recessions go up, more people, particularly those right on the margins of being able to afford a car, tend to come back to public transit. But if that's happening at the same time our costs are going up, that's a tough spot to be in. And if the debt is a problem, the federal government may be less capable of assisting as they've had. In the pandemic, we got relief packages. We don't generally get relief packages in recessions. So a very different scenario could roll out there. And then, I don't want to ignore, this is a slide about the economy, and I'm trying to keep this very much at an economic level for this organization, because the federal stuff is really about money. I don't want to ignore the anxiety, I think I could say, in our society about the totality of all of these changes. I haven't even talked about the executive orders on gender and things like that. It may not have a direct effect on this organization, but it affects the people we serve, and we're concerned about that. So we don't want to lose track of it, but it's maybe not a hard economic factor, if you will. So final thoughts, and then we'll open it up to your questions. So again, I want to be reassuring here, no direct impacts to this agency. Because of our position, we've managed to sort of dodge these executive orders, don't really seem to be relevant to us at the moment, so this is good. There's lots of uncertainty and speculation, and Dina and I, putting this together, said, we don't want to go down all those rabbit holes. For sure, board members are thinking it themselves. We are going to continue to sort of react as the situation evolves, as information comes to light. We are, however, overhauling our entire strategic planning framework because our environment is changing quite a lot. So as I mentioned, the risk profile is going up. We're heading to DC, as Jeff mentioned, to try to help people there understand the implications. Same thing in Lansing when we get to state funding, maybe next month. I'm going to continue to navigate per your board policies. Like you've given me, I think, a really excellent framework of your expectations as a group. We're not going to stop pursuing your ends. We're going to continue on. Maybe with a bit more of a, antenna up for risk and keeping an eye out, and maybe in more incremental steps rather than going whole hog on some things. But your policies provide us with, I think, a really good foundation of how to proceed with caution. And as we discuss this, one thing, in addition to the means, these sorts of questions about the funding here, you may want to consider is, do you feel your policy framework should be updated in response to anything you're hearing here? This is mostly under the hood, how the money works kinds of discussions, but perhaps you'll light on something that you think you could express more clearly to me as part of your policies. So with that, Madam Chair and board members, happy to answer your questions. Jeff, Dina, and I, and the rest of our group here at your disposal.
Great, thank you, Matt. I'm going to open it up to the board, and does anyone have any questions for any of the panelists? Susan?
One of the things you didn't mention as implications for the business is with these tariffs, I'm hearing a lot about automobile costs escalating. We've got over a dozen buses coming our way. Are buses completely manufactured in the United States and therefore not likely to be affected by tariffs, or are they crossing the border like all these other vehicles that I'm reading about? What is the implication for our buses?
That's an excellent question. you know, what day is it? You know, like that's part of the challenge everyone has, is that we don't know what the rules are that we're all going to be playing by 90 days, 2 days from now. One thing we did hear very clearly from one of the two major bus manufacturers left that we can buy from is that if the tariffs from Liberation Day, if you'll pardon the term, go into effect as they were originally described, that would cause them to increase the purchase price of a bus 5 to 13%. So it's not an insignificant amount of money. I mean, they're made of steel, they're made of aluminum, a lot of these things, where are they coming from? Yes, it is a highly integrated manufacturing thing. A lot of the things we use, you know, the Cummins engines that go in our buses, same engines that go in tractors and other pieces of heavy equipment. So they're very much in that supply line soup. The ramification of that scenario, and again, it hasn't happened, I want to be clear, that more of our formula funds will be consumed just replacing our fleet. As a transportation agency, you know, as I mentioned before, we might be able to do without a terminal building, but we can't function without buses. That is what we do. So that would be, you know, the thing we would always have to do the most of. We're already expanding the lifespan of those, try to get more miles out of them, but that is an implication. Something Dina didn't mention about the formula funds, we got a top up in sort of in the IIJA to our 5307 formula funds to help offset inflation. That was naturally going to sunset with the IIJA, so we're expecting that to drop anyway, back down to sort of where it would have been historically. So a double whammy of lower there, higher on the inflation, that would be a hard hit.
Other questions? Mike?
Matt, if I recall, you said briefly that what's going on here will likely have some significant effect on our long-range plan. Am I correct in remembering that? You
I may have qualified it with the word could.
Okay, could. All right. Is there anything that you think might be affected then? Or, I mean, can you be any more specific about what might happen to our long-range plan? I mean, it can't be good.
Well, you know, I've been surprised by Republican administrations in the past. Some weird things come out of the legislative process that are hard to expect. As I mentioned before, we rely on federal capital funding for state of good repair and expansion. Our long-range plan is primarily about expansion. So the competitive grants, like the ones we'll likely go after for the rest of the YTC money, garage money, BRT money, all those are discretionary competitive grants. We will find out their future in this reauthorization bill. We may be able to submit a grant application for the YTC under the last year of this funding bill. We might be able to squeak that in. But if not, all of the other projects are definitely in the next 5-year package. So I'll be able to give you a better answer when we know the details of that. If those things are, if those fundings levels are all kept the same, hypothetically, as an example, there would be much more competition for them because inflation would have been pushing everybody and all of our projects up. So it would be a more intense competition for those. So it most likely won't make it easier, no.
Any other questions? Jesse?
I know the federal money primarily affects our capital budget, but just thinking of our budget more holistically, you know, we recently decided to lower the threshold for our rainy day fund, like, or is any of this causing us to rethink that move or other kind of moves that we've made? But I guess I was thinking primarily of the going down to 2 months from 2.5 months of operational funding.
It's a question about the operating reserve.
Yeah,
I'm going to ask
reserve, thank you.
Dina maybe to weigh in on this one, but I think the question is, are any of these changes here causing us to wonder if going to 2 months on the operating reserve was still the right choice? Okay, Dina, do you want to take a swing at that one?
Sure, thanks. No, I don't, I'm feeling still confident with the 2 months of cash. Right now, the only thing, and we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about the state funding. The only thing that, concerns me about our, could concern me about our budget is if the state funding doesn't come through for it's around 29 to 30% funding that we get from the state for our operating budget. But we have, and all of our projections are still holding strong. On the property tax side, the property tax revenues have come in strong. Again, we're watching that over time. But everything that we've seen so far is consistent with what we've been projecting. And we think we will know more when the state budget comes out, but they're in the middle of that process right now. Even so, the day-to-day operating cash that we have and with the funding of our capital reserve fully funded, we're not in a tight cash position anytime in the near term. So I still think that was a reasonable move to make, comfortable with it.
One thing I'll say, just to add on to that, there's a kind of compartmentalization that happens with our funding. Federal funding, by and large, can only be used for capital. So we couldn't use it for our operating reserve even if we wanted to. State and federal funding, or local and state funding is a mixture, but it's primarily on the operating side of it. So we can kind of keep those two sides of the ledger clear in our mind. Feds for capital, state and local for operating, and manage our budget somewhat in that way. Because I mentioned the strings that are attached to the money, many of these pieces of money can only be used for one or the other by law. So the state LBO that Dina is mentioning, I don't think we could flex that into capital even if we wanted. I think it has to be used for operating. Our local property tax is probably the most flexible thing we have. It could go either way.
Thank you. Any other questions? Seeing none, I think, thank you very much for that presentation. You've given us a lot to think about. We're going to move on now to Mr. Jeff Pfeiffer with regards to legislative updates.
Thanks so much. I will keep this brief. I think we've talked quite a bit on the federal side, so I will focus on state side today. Michigan legislature has been in spring break for the past 3 weeks or so. Senate was back in this week. House still has not come back. A lot of focus. Senate Appropriations had a committee hearing on the House's $3.1 billion road funding package. I think I mentioned this at previous board meetings. Package is, I would say, a starting point from the initial iteration. It's not great for public transit. It only included $50 million going to the CTF, which is split between public transit and rail, so not great. But basically, it would be taking $2.2 billion in the corporate income tax, as well as all of the gas tax, and reallocating that to road funding. At the committee, I watched both the Republican members from the House as well as Senate Democrats did call out the lack of public transit funding and then just attention in the bill. Both parties acknowledged it. Republicans, kept the notion that this is strictly for road funding, and the larger funding package will come out later in the next couple months. On that, really the state budget portion, we're waiting on the May consensus revenue estimating conference, which is taking place in late May. From there, we'll go to conference committees, at which point we'll then see House kick out a version of the budget that will go to the Senate, and then we'll have a reconciliation process. Essentially, where we'll have members of both the House and Senate work on a final budget that will be presented, voted in both chambers, then presented to the governor. So more to come on that in May. I would assume probably be post-board meeting, because I think our board meeting is a little bit earlier next month, but we'll keep everyone updated. And obviously, we're continuing to converse with our delegation here in Washington County.
Do we have any questions for Mr. Pfeiffer? Seeing none, thank you, Jeff. We'll move on to Matt for the CEO report.
very briefly, the report's in your packet. The only thing I would simply draw your attention to is continuing ongoing positive conversations with the Ann Arbor Housing Commission and their colleagues, contractor, about our participation on the site. It has gone well since we last spoke about this a month ago. We're happy to answer any questions. Other than that, if there are any questions about anything in the report, happy to try to answer.
Thank you, Matt. Any questions for Mr. Carpenter? Seeing none, we'll close that out. Next on our agenda is the CEO contract update. I just wanted to let everyone know that we are moving right along, and we'll have a contract available for your viewing before the next board meeting. I want to remind everyone that his contract ends May 31st, and so it is important that we do our due diligence and make sure that we ask all the questions that we need to ask and get the contract ratified before it ends. Next on the agenda is meeting length, which is a agenda item requested by Mr. Simi Bar, and I'm going to ask him to introduce his question.
Yeah, thanks, Kathleen. We had chatted about this before. I think we've had some lengthy meetings recently, and I know on our agenda, we say 6:30 to 9 p.m. That's a 2.5-hour meeting. I think in most cases we should be able to handle our business in 2.5 hours. I looked back to the beginning of 2024, so about 15 meetings or so. I think we hit that mark only 4 times. So, I think we could do better. I think it'll show more respect to the staff that are here as well as everyone on the board. And we're going to be looking for a new board member here shortly. I think it's important that they sort of know what they're in for. And having indefinite meetings, I think, can make that complicated. So I wanted to bring it up, see what other people thought. I think, my thought might be a resolution to try to stick more precisely to this time limit. And that doesn't mean in some cases we, have pressing business that would push us over, but something to give us a little more structure. So I'll leave it at that.
Thoughts from the board? Kyra.
I agree. I have one suggestion. Another board that I'm on I was on, the agenda would have an allocation of how long we think each item is going to take. And obviously sometimes we'd go over or under that, but I think that might help. That's more onerous for the staff. I believe the staff of that organization sort of blocked that out for the board. But I think that could be helpful for keeping us on track to have a rough estimate. And that's probably something that could be done at the governance committee when you approve the agenda for the coming meeting. So one suggestion.
Good suggestion. Any other comments or questions or concerns, Mike?
Yes, I think Simi has brought up an issue that probably all of us have thought at, particularly certain nights. And I certainly hope that we can aspire to, if not completely achieve, the goal of ending our meetings around 9 o'clock. I think that would be beneficial to the board, to the staff, and just overall feeling better about things. Perhaps I think it would be a good idea for the governance committee to talk about what Kyra is suggesting. I mean, that does apply, does work, or well, at least is used by other boards. Maybe if another thing that we could talk about at the governance committee meeting is, if not trying to allocate each item to a time frame, talk about each agenda in terms of how long we expect it to take for the board. And I think we have enough experience that we can kind of have a fairly good idea whether it's going to be short, around time, or around at 9 o'clock, or has a good chance of going over. And if we think it has a good chance of going over, I think we should discuss at the board, at the governance committee, what we might do to make that shorter. And sometimes we have extended or put things to the next board meeting, but of course things then build up. That's not a good way to approach it unless we absolutely have to. So I think it's a very good thing that Simi brought that up, and I hope that we can have some good discussions at the governance committee and again at the board.
Any other comments? I'm just going to play a little bit of devil's advocate in that. No, I think it's definitely something that needs to be looked at, and there are ways that maybe we can help get it closer to the 9 o'clock mark. I just want to remind everyone, we only meet 12 times a year, and we have assigned ourselves a large task with the education we wish to receive. We have the ends coming up. We have a lot of the long-range plans coming up online in terms of YTC. There's going to be Open Meeting Act for construction and things like that. We're going to be having some other heavy questions or initiatives and things that are coming up that are going to need a lot of time. It may mean that we may need to put a greater onus of discussion happening at the Service Committee and the Finance Committee and the Governance Committee level, where more recommendations come towards the board, where maybe the lion's share of the work is done at the committee level and then brought to the board so that we can help shrink this time. I do know that when Matt and I sit down and we develop the agenda, we try our very best, but sometimes things happen. And meetings can go long because of the amount of discussion that needs to take place on a particular item. However, what I like about your suggestion, Kyra, is that when people can see we have this in such agenda item and we've prognosticated that it might take about 20 minutes, it may help board members stay more focused. That's something that we can work on ourselves, like come to the meetings prepared, come with our questions, come with what we're willing to navigate, what we're willing to compromise on, those sorts of things. So it's going to place a greater amount of work on pre-work on our parts to make sure that we are up to speed before we even get here. But I'm excited to talk about this, have this discussion. I agree with Mike that I think the best place to start is at the governance committee level to try to figure out how we can manage this. Kyra, excellent suggestion on the timing. And yeah, I know I had the same concern as well. When we run over, it can be exhausting. But again, we have set a very high bar for us, and our work is ever increasing right now just because of the LRP. We're receiving extra information on legislative updates that we didn't have to hear before. So our agenda is becoming quite compressed. So thank you, everyone. And based on what I just said, does anybody have any further comment or discussion? Yes, Jesse.
Yeah, I'm all in favor of shorter board meetings. I find it difficult to think about how board meetings can be shortened without an analysis of what we think we're spending too much time on. So I think maybe just a couple notes for the governance committee of that, like looking at what is it that's taking too long? And I also want to bring up a suggestion that I had made in the past of doing more in terms of doing more prep work. Having recorded presentations. We spend a certain amount of time receiving presentations from staff. I think if we could explore the implications of what it would look like to have recordings of those presentations that board members could watch on their own time, and then allowing us to launch into a discussion immediately at the board meeting. I think that could potentially save us a lot of time without necessarily causing us to rush important conversations. I think there are implications, who has access to, fast enough internet to watch those recordings. But I think I just wanted to bring up that idea as a potential time saver.
That is something that we can definitely float, the opposite of that as well as that it's available for the public. So we would have to figure out a way how to splice those in so that it's available for public viewing as well. I see your hand raised, Julie.
Sure. Thank you. I think there's really good science behind how well people function after a certain length of time. So I really appreciate it. I've been on boards where we've moved other things into the consent agenda. So that would be just a suggestion I would have for governance to think about if there are other things that don't actually require discussion. Sometimes we have, I'm just going to give you an example, like monitoring or policy where no one gives any comments. And maybe that's, if that's the case, or and it's just an example, there could be lots of other things, and I'll leave that to governance. But that's a strategy.
Great. Any other comments beyond Julie? No? Thank you for raising your concerns to me. I think it was on everyone's mind, and you were just the brave one to put it out there. We are at 9:06, keeping that in mind. Next on our agenda item is a bittersweet agenda item. It's Ms. Kyra. Kyra has been with us since 2017, and you have been a very valuable member of this board. The wealth of information that you share, your kindness, your ability to really focus in on an issue and give information in a way that's well understood, it has really been, on my part, I very much appreciated that. I would like to open it up to the board real quick to embarrass you a little bit, if anybody would like to say anything to Kyra, and also open it up to staff, Matt, anyone else. Or not, you could have just. Kyra, we have a card for you. And I'm sorry to say, I know you're going to be super disappointed, but we do not have a TheRide mailbox for you today. But we do have, I think, something, that you will enjoy, and I hope that you were able to use it and think of us. Actually, I think it might be fun. Okay. Because not everyone knows and has seen it.
I'm going to take photos.
It's quite a card. Do you want me to see? It's a bus, and it has our logo and everything on it. Very cool. You'll be able to use it for a paperweight, and you won't have to store your mail in it. Of course.
I know we're after time, so I'll be quick. And I was hoping to just go quietly into the night. I'm sure some of you anticipated that. I just want to say quickly, I've been on the board almost 10 years, and we've accomplished a lot. The adoption and implementation of policy governance, looming deficits that we've climbed out of, 2 millages, the long-range plan, a lot of things that we've accomplished as a board that I'm very proud of. And I want to particularly thank Eric Mahler, who I'm sure is not watching this, but for recruiting me to the board and really shepherding me. This was my first professional board that I joined, and he was really a leader and mentor for me. Matt as well, who was right along with him, acclimating me to the board. Forrest and John Metzinger, who I did policy governance training with when I was a new board member. And Mike, who is served along with me for most of the time that I've been on the board. And special thank you also to Deb, who has kept things running and always is very responsive and respectful and tolerates me getting things in at the very last second. And lastly, to Kathleen and the rest of the board, I feel confident in being able to step away from the board because I know it's in such good hands with all of you. So thank you very much, and I appreciate it.
Thank you, Kyra. We wish you well. Back to the board meeting. Action item recap, Ms. Deb?
It was actually quite brief tonight. I will be adding the meeting length discussion to the governance committee agenda. And then Dina and Matt's PowerPoint presentations, I will upload those to the board packet. So those will be publicly available. I didn't have any other action items.
Great. Next is topics for next meeting. We'll be discussing the environmental sustainability policy 2.11. Governance process policies will be coming into your email boxes soon. So we'll be talking about 3.5 through 3.8. We'll receive the quarterly 2 financial report, the YTC update, and a BTC update. In the future, probably June, we will discuss determining reasonableness. And finally, in May, our next meeting, we are meeting back in Ypsilanti at the Riverside Arts Center. With that, Deb, we're back to public comment 9.3. Is there anybody in the wings there?
We have no one for public comment.
Very good. I know you're sad to do this based on all our discussions tonight, but would somebody like to make a motion to adjourn? That would be Susan, seconded by Kyra. All those in favor, raise your hands. Very good. Everybody have a wonderful evening. Yes, sir.